All right. Well, thank you everyone once again for joining us for today's webinar on financial reporting in Dynamics Business Central 365. Today, John Hoyt is going to be presenting. He is our BC Solutions Architect here at TruNorth. He is a BC whiz. He's been an ERP consultant and solution architect for well over 20 years. So without further ado, John, take it away.
Great. Thank you very much, Michaela. And welcome to the webinar, everybody. Go ahead and get started. So in today's webinar, we're going to talk about financial reporting in Business Central. I want to walk through first some of the prerequisites that are necessary before we can dive too far into the financial reporting. There is some setup that will need to be done on your side before you're ready to start printing out any financial reports, financial statements. After we've gone through the prerequisites, we'll go through how you actually create and run a financial statement in the Business Central system. After we've gone through the basics of the core financial statements, we'll turn our attention to the Excel-based reports that are available in Business Central. That includes the typical financial statements and trial balances, as well as now some more of the subledger reporting. We'll probably focus on that at a future webinar. I do want to briefly talk a little bit towards the end about financial reporting in Power BI, and then the alternatives that are available for Business Central users if the standard financial statements or the Excel-based reports just aren't quite what you're looking for. There are a lot of extensions available in the app source that would allow you to probably meet some of those goals, some of those requirements. So let's jump in real quick and we'll talk about those prerequisites first. I'll pull up my Business Central system. The first thing that we need to do is we need to make sure that we have mapped our general ledger posting accounts into general ledger account categories. I'm logged in as the business manager role. So for me on my finance dropdown, I can go directly to things like my chart, of course, but I can go directly to the GL account categories. And the account categories really just allow me to create the basic format in the financial statements, balance sheet and income statement. And then within those various headings, I'm going to be able to assign individual GL accounts, or as you can see here in some of my examples, a range of accounts can be included. So you'll see for cash, for example, I'm running anything between account 18100 and account 8500. When I define my account categories using a range like that, it gives me the ability to insert a new GL account, maybe a new cash account or a savings account or something. And because I have inserted it into that defined range, my financial reports will automatically pick up that account for me. If I add a new cash account for something outside of that defined range, then I would need to come back in here to my account category and adjust my definition so that it does include either as part of a range or just a standalone account, but it does need to include all of those new accounts that I have inside my system. Once we've done that mapping between the general ledger posting accounts and my general ledger account categories, the next step in getting ready to run my financial statements is going to be to define how I'm going to use dimensions inside the Business Central reporting. And dimensions, of course, are things that we can define as users to represent various aspects or various focuses of the business, whether that's an internal focus or an external focus. So I might want to be able to break down my income and expenses by something like the different departments that I have inside my company. Once I've defined a dimension that's going to track the departments, I then have the ability to create a list of values that I'm going to enter in during transaction processing, indicate that this particular transaction belongs to a specific department, or it's going to be split across multiple departments, however the case might be. With dimensions then set up, and the dimension values populated, when I run my financial statements, I can choose to run it for all of my departments or all of my locations or all of my regions, however I'm going to be setting up the dimensions, or I can use that as a way to filter and create a income statement or a balance sheet that reflects the activity of just a single department or just a couple of departments. That might be very useful, for example, if I'm sharing that expense information with the department heads. I can create a version of my financial statement that shows the expenses per department, distribute that out to the following users. They get some information then that relates only to their areas of responsibility. The third prerequisite is setting up general ledger budgets. One of the attributes or one of the capabilities of the financial reports inside of Business Central is the ability to do comparison reports, actual versus budget. First, before I can run that comparison report, I'm going to have to create one or more budgets inside the system. As a sample, a budget for the year 2024, and I've chosen to restrict this to just my income and expense accounts. So see that I'm beginning here simply with my revenue accounts. Then I've indicated the additional expense accounts that I want included, showing the correct years, but I would go through and I would have the available information each period for each one of those accounts. And then once again, as I create my financial reports, I'll have the ability to specify which GL budget I want to report against. And a quick side note there on the budgets themselves, Business Central, of course, allows you to have an unlimited number of budgets inside the system. And those budgets can all cover the same period of time if you need. That allows me to create a worst case scenario budget, a best case scenario budget, maybe a third budget that was based on last year's actuals with a 10% growth factor. However you want to set up those different budgets. And then again, when I run my actual financial reports, I'll have the ability to go back and specify which GL budget and which dimensions do I want to run or use within that specific version report that I'm going to be creating, whatever that might be. So taking care of the prerequisites then, we've mapped the GL posting, we've done the dimensions, we've talked about setting up general ledger budgets. When you create a report, a financial report in Business Central, what you are essentially doing is creating a report that combines a row definition and a column definition. The row definition defines what needs to be calculated. Are we looking at the balance sheet accounts? Are we looking at the income statement accounts? Maybe we're doing something that pertains to cash flow forecast. That defines what needs to be calculated in the rows. The column definition will define how we want that data presented for the calculation itself. So in some cases, an income statement or a balance sheet, it may only be for the current period, and I'm just going to have a single column that represents the current month. In other cases, I may want to do something like a 12-month rolling income statement. And I'll have multiple columns, each one defined in relationship to its colleagues. So current month for column 1, current month minus 1 month for column 2, current month minus 2 months for column 3, etc. That allows me to produce on demand that rolling 12-month statement, and I don't have to go in and hand key or hand code what months I want to include. It's all based simply upon the current month, which I'm using in column number 1. So once I have my row definitions created, I have my column definitions created, creating a financial report really is just a matter of specifying what row definition and what column definition are we going to join together to produce that particular version of a financial statement. We might, for example, have a row definition that's highly summarized and produces a one-page report. We might have a second row definition that is in full detail, shows the activity for every account in my chart, and that might take up multiple pages to run that out. And then, of course, depending on who my audience might be for those different reports, I might provide either the summarized version or the detailed version. And it would really depend on the audience and their needs, whoever's going to be looking at those particular. If you've not spent much time inside Business Central working with the financial reports yet, let me just give you a quick heads up. The sample financial reports in BC are not ready to use directly out of the box against your data. They are available to use immediately on the sample company data from Cronus USA, but against your company, you may have made some setup choices, some configuration choices, whether that's how you set up your GL accounts, your categories, dimensions, budgets, whatever it might be. Those choices may require some adjustments or some modifications that get made to the sample finance reports and the sample row and column definitions within those. Once you have the row and column definitions matched up to the way your company has configured, then the reports should run just fine using the sample reports out of Business Central as a starting point for it. So with the prerequisites out of the way, the next thing that we need to do is actually go in and start to create our first financial reports. Let's do that now. I'm going to go to my Cronus USA company again. From my finance dropdown, I'm going to go into the financial reporting tab. And of course, I could do this just as well by using the search function and just type in financial reports if you don't already have it bookmarked and a link for it like I do. So that list now shows me all of the reports that have been set up in my sample company. And you'll notice the description varies, whether it's balance sheet, cash flow statement, income statement, etc. You'll also see that I have multiple versions of some of these different reports. For each one of the reports that have been created, I have specified a row definition that will be used and a column definition that will be used. Creating a new report can be as simple as giving it a new name and then specifying what I want to use as my row definition and what I want to use as my column definition. If we click on New, I simply add in a new name for how I want to refer to this, and we'll call this the webinar income statement. And then I'll need to specify the row definition that I want to use, and I'm going to do this with my standard income. And a column definition that I want to use. And I want to see net changes between periods, so I'll specify that column definition as well. Note that when you fill in the things like the report name here, this cannot be changed once it's been created. I could change the description, but I will be locked into whatever naming convention I've specified here. So you might want to put a little thought in ahead of time how I want to name or what convention I want to use for naming the various reports that are inside the list. After we've chosen the row definition and the column definition, if you want, you can choose what we call analysis views. And the analysis views are simply a way that we want to have the report structured. It's an optional task. You do not have to use the analysis views. It just specifies the row definition that I want this to be based upon. A particular way I want to view or the way that I want to analyze the data inside the system. After I've given it a name, a row definition, and a column definition, I can choose to view my financial report. And this gives me an on-screen look at how my report would appear if I went ahead and did the printing of it. So I've got some general header information across the top. Do I want to view net change by the day, by the week, by the month, quarter, whatever would be appropriate. And I can then specify a date range that I want to work with. Give it a date range to make sure I've got some data in place. I can choose all lines, or I can choose to only show those lines that have values that have had a change from a prior period. I can enter in now my dimension filters. The dimensions as we set those up can be applied both globally or would apply just to a specific area of the general ledger, for example. If I wanted to now do a filtered report, I just specify which of the departments I want to include, or a range of departments, whatever would be appropriate. I can specify in other cases, maybe I've got my customer group set up as a global dimension as well. After the dimension filters have been set, if you're going to use any on this version of the report, I can specify a general ledger budget, compare against budget. You'll notice as I make changes to either the date filter or the other values here in defining this report, the preview section down across the bottom has been updating to show me what the actual values are going to be within that period. If I want to make any changes to my definitions, whether it's a row definition or a column definition, I have the ability to do that while I'm building out the report. This is my row definition, how I want to have income determined, my cost of goods sold determined, etc. You'll notice in the row definition and in the column definition, it looks very similar. I have the ability to specify whether I want this particular row to be in bold or italicized or underlined. Just a way to kind of dress up the visual aspect of the report as I go through. And I can nest together or indent, outdent my columns, etc. Once I have that done, I can go to my options, show all my filters. And on that dimensions tab, like I was talking about, we can specify what we want to have in as the dimension filters, dimension periods, etc. Once I have that financial report set up, back to the home, I can now ask the system to recalculate. So it would update my financial report data here and look for any changes that might have been made. Maybe categories have been changed. Maybe I've changed a row definition or column definition in the background, etc. And I need to go through and take a look at that. Make sure that that's been properly addressed inside the report itself. When everything's done, I now have the option to either export this out to Excel, and all of the financial statements in Business Central can be sent to Excel, or I can simply say I want to do a basic print. That's what we're going to do here to view this. So I've specified the finance report layout, row definition, and column definition that I'm going to be using to run this report. The date range has pulled over for me from my presets. I could specify I want a GL budget, yes or no, or a cost budget, yes or no. And then down at the bottom, I get the ability again to work with the different dimensions that are available to me. And I can filter based upon those dimension values. I'm not going to make any changes. I want to look at the income statement for the whole company for that quarter. I'm going to click the preview. Now I get a sample version of that report. The row definition that I've chosen is very summarized, so I don't get a lot of account by account detail here. And this might be appropriate for a very quick meeting, whoever might be asking just a current statement. I could also, of course, have a definition that was done in full detail, and I would show account by account what the balances are, the changes are for that particular period. I'm going to return back to the list that I have for the full set of financial statements that I have. And again, I have the ability to do a copy of an existing report. Maybe that summarized income statement I want to make a copy of. And then I'm going to make a change to the row definition that I want to use. I can also choose to export the definitions of these reports themselves out to an Excel template. And then I could switch to a different BC company and import that template into the secondary company. This is really helpful, for example, if you're working inside the Cronus USA company with a report format that you like, you want to adopt that for your own production company. Come here to the financial reporting definitions list, select the report that you want to move to your production company, and then say you want to export that definition out of Cronus. Once that's been created, I can switch over to my production company and I can import that report definition in. I don't have to recreate any of it by hand. I can adopt it the way that it came across to me. I'm going to return back to my home page just momentarily, and let's come back here. So we have walked through the steps of creating a new report, laid them out here for you, and as always, we can make this PowerPoint available to anybody who like it afterwards. You just go through the step by step. There's only 9 steps involved. And once that's been created, then I have my new report available and I'm ready to go inside the Business Central system for those reporting. A couple of things that I want to point out here. When you open a financial report in either the view or the edit mode, there's a filter pane that is available. My recommendation is don't use that filter pane to set the filters for the data in your report. Filters created at this level can cause errors or might not actually filter the data. Instead, use the fields on the Options and the Dimensions Fast tab to set up the report filters that you want to actually use. Do that as part of the printing process, not part of the definition process. Okay, with that little note out of the way, best practices for report definitions. And these hold true whether I'm talking about the financial reports or the row definitions or the column definitions. You want to choose a good identifying code and fill in that description field with meaningful text. Do that while you still have a clear understanding of what you're creating, what the report's going to be intended. Accuracy in both of the code and the description field will be helpful for coworkers, yourself at some point in the future, to simply understand what that report is intended to do and understand if you need to make any changes to that report definition. There is no version control of reports, report definitions, row definitions, or column definitions in Business Central. If you make a change to an existing definition, you are overwriting that definition. Best practice recommendation then would be to, instead of changing the existing definition, make a copy of it and make your changes on the copy. That will preserve the original and you would be able to still use that original definition at some point in the future. And emphasize that enough. It's very easy to copy a definition in Business Central. Just pull up a new company or recreate the sample company. Use that as the source so you have a clean working template that you can import into your existing company. So even if you did do something to change or alter one of the original definitions in your production company, that's fine. We can still recover from that using the report definitions that are included in the sample company, Cronus USA. So using dimensions in our financial reports. Dimensions, again, are just a way to add more detail, a little more clarity around a transaction, above and beyond what you would get simply by assigning the transaction to the appropriate posting groups that have the general ledger accounts underlying those posting groups. When I set up my dimensions, I'm setting up the ability to do a refinement of my data, looking more carefully at a particular area of the business. So, very important that we have those set up correctly, and it allows us to start to do some multi-dimensional analysis. I can look at things like what was the revenue for geographic area and maybe by department as well. get greater insights into your business, how well the business is operating, areas for improvement, where I should be allocating resources, etc. The ability to include dimensions is really powerful, and I consider very carefully how you can take best advantage of that capability as you set up your own financial reports or your own financial statements inside the Business Central system. So we walked through the prerequisites for creating financial reports. We've talked about how to actually create the basic financial statements, screen, or use them as a template for that import-export function. Next, I want to turn our attention to some of the Excel-based reports that are available inside of Business Central. On my homepage, I have an action link to all of the various Excel reports that are currently available in the Business Central system. And you'll see across the top of that list, it's what you would expect from basic financial reporting. So we have a balance sheet, income statement, cash flow, retained earnings. There are trial balances that can be printed out for doing reconciliation work inside of Business Central. And then we are starting to add in more and more of what I would call some of the subledger or more detailed reports, whether that are aging reports, different views of the trial balance, consolidations, fixed asset reporting, etc. There are a couple of advantages in my mind to using the Excel-based versions of reports. One of them is, I say this with great affection for the Business Central system, the standard financial reports don't really look all that good. They're not what I would call presentation quality reports or presentation quality statements. If I need to be putting together a presentation for maybe the board of directors, maybe I'm going to be talking to my banker later in the week about extending my line of credit, something of that nature, I will most likely, instead of using the standard Business Central reports, I'll switch over and start to look at some of the Excel-based reports. And I'm doing that not because it's any better at presenting the data from a data perspective, but rather I'm using it because it's easier for me to format and create a visual presentation of that data that is either easier to read, it's more explanatory, looks more professional, whatever it might be. So in this case, I have an income statement that I'm running through a couple of years worth of, my from dates and my to dates. I am logged into Business Central via the data connector. So I am able to refresh this report on demand. I can get current information. I can also, of course, with the Excel-based reports, I can share a static version of this report with non-Business Central users. They don't need a Business Central license to simply look at the Excel version of the report. What they give up is some of the tools that a BC user would have in terms of refreshing on demand, working with the data in other ways, things like that. So whether it's an income statement, whether it's a balance sheet, they're all available as basic Excel reports. Again, can either be refreshed and used in that manner by a BC user or simply presented as a static version of a report. So between the standard financial reports and the Excel-based reports, you're getting the same information. Determining which one is appropriate, in my mind, really comes down to what is the purpose, who's the audience, and do I want to give them a quick, simple version of a report coming directly out of Business Central, or do I need to spend some time inside of the Excel versions and get them cleaned up, get them dressed up to the point where I have them presentation ready, and I'm more than willing to share them again with like a board of directors or the banking group, somebody like that. I'll talk a little bit about financial reporting in Power BI. You can use Power BI to do a number of wonderful things. Overall, a very big fan of Power BI. But if we pull up Power BI and look at just some of the samples that you see here, Power BI in my mind is not really a financial reporting tool in that same sense we were just talking about for how I'm going to create presentation quality reports and distribute them out to the appropriate audience. Power BI, in my mind, is truly a data visualization tool. For any of the data that Business Central holds that is best presented in terms of a visualization or a graphic of some kind, charts or bar graphs or whatever it might be, I think Power BI is wonderful. But I would not turn to Power BI if I need to create a report that has rows and columns of figures like a standard financial report would include. For something like that, again, I would use either the Excel-based reports that I have natively coming out of Business Central, or if I turn my attention to the app source and I search simply for financial reports inside Business Central, you can see that there is a recognized need among the app source community. There's a lot of different ways that we can add additional financial reporting capabilities, statement reporting capabilities to our Business Central system, whether that's something like Jet Reports for Business Central, for example, has a wealth of predefined templated reports based on your Business Central data and delivered and managed via the Jet Reports tool. There are quite a few, as you can see, 233 different results in Business Central, just looking at financial reporting as the required capability or the desired capability of the system. So my recommendation would be, let's start with the basic Business Central reports or the basic Excel reports and determine whether or not that's going to be sufficient to meet your need or your requirement for reporting. And if it does, wonderful, then we don't have to pursue this any further at all. However, if you've looked at the basic Business Central reports and the Excel versions of those reports and determined that they're just not going to meet your needs, don't worry, there are plenty of options available. We can find the appropriate solution for you, most likely inside the App Source tool itself. So Excel-based reporting, absolutely. Number of very strong attributes that go with that: the ability to share the report with non-Business Central users, the ability to format it and lay it out in a way that is visually pleasing and accomplishes your goals in that regard. Financial reporting in Power BI, I would really leave that more for a dashboard view or something that is KPI focused. And I would not turn to Power BI if I was looking for a traditional figure, columns and rows of figures in that type of reporting. As we just talked about, there are a number of alternatives available if the standard Business Central capabilities, for whatever reason, simply fall short of your requirement, whatever that might be. I'm going to close before we get to any questions, if we have any. Just some quick upcoming webinars and boot camps. As you can see, we've got a very full calendar for the balance of Q1. We're going to continue this pace for both webinars and the boot camps throughout the course of 2025. You can get a complete listing of what's going to be upcoming at our website. We're going to be doing a customer service demo. That's the not Business Central, that's the CRM focused demo that's coming up next week. I'm going to be doing a generic Business Central demo, core functionality, the week of the 19th, and AI document assistance at the end of the month. Those are all upcoming webinars, free to attend. I believe we have registration links on the website as well. Michaela can correct me about that if I got that wrong. And then if you haven't heard, we're introducing boot camps. They are a nominal charge per attendee. They are in-depth, hands-on dives into key aspects of the Business Central system or the Dynamics 365 sales system. As you can see, we're doing financial management next week in Business Central on the 18th. March 11th is going to be Sales 101 and followed a week later with Sales 201. All of those are available for registration today. at a cost of $79 per attendee. You can view our website there to get all the events and register for whatever's coming up that is of interest to you. And of course, feel free to share those links with any of your colleagues or coworkers who might need to spend any time learning that material. So I will thank everyone for their time and their attention as we've gone through the financial reporting inside Business Central. Michaela, do we have any questions?
I am looking, and it looks like we do not have any questions at this time. Everyone on this call and anyone else who is registered will be getting an email with the slide deck and the recording. And I will also put in our client success email just in case anyone has further questions that they think of later today or anytime going forward.
Great. Thank you, Michaela. My email address is there on the screen. Welcome any feedback you might have about the contents of this webinar, and perhaps more importantly, any suggestions that you might have for content for an upcoming webinar. There's a particular part of the Business Central system that you've heard about but don't know a lot and want to learn more. Let's just say advanced warehousing as an example. Just send me a quick email. Say, hey, John, saw the webinar on financial reporting. Hopefully you enjoyed it. But I'd like to see a webinar in the future on this topic or these topics. Or in some cases, we can do that very simply, just set up the webinar topic and move forward. In other cases, I may push back a little bit and say, that's a really detailed deep dive. Let's take that offline. Maybe we'll just set up a one-on-one session with you directly, and we can walk through that particular question or concern or explore a particular area of Business Central, whatever might be appropriate. And with that, I think we have reached the end of this webinar. So I will thank you all for your time and attention, and I hope you enjoy the rest of your day. Thank you very much, everyone.